Advisory Committee. Okay, I'll start over. Good evening. This is the Fisher Hill West Uses Advisory Committee meeting for September 8th, 2025. I'm Bernard Green, chair of this committee. Our agenda items are primarily a report by the town administrator, Chaz Carey, for on the community resource based on public needs as compiled by town departments. I'm just reading off the agenda. Okay. Administrative items, do we have minutes to approve? Okay,
Yes.
they were just posted, so I suggest we wait till our next meeting.
I sent them out on September 2nd, but if people need more time to read them, we can wait until the next meeting.
Okay, have other people had a chance to read them?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's vote. All in favor of the minutes for, and what is the date, Maria?
March 10th, 2025.
Oh, that one. Okay, no, I've read that. Thought there's something more recent. All in favor of minutes for March 10, 2025, please indicate by saying aye. Maria, since you probably see more than I do, could you call the roll?
Sure. Michael Roper.
Yeah, I abstain, Maria. I haven't read them yet.
Okay. Marilyn.
I'll abstain because I didn't attend it.
Okay. Steve Sousa.
Yes.
Steve Hyken.
Yes.
Carlos Ridrejo.
Yes.
I don't know if Carol Goodman is here. I don't think she's present. And Bernard.
I actually read those a long time ago, but I don't recall having any problems, so I'll vote yes.
Okay. I think I got everybody. Okay.
Okay, so first item on the agenda, Town Administrator Chaz Carey to present the results of work with the town departments to come up with ideas for using the site, both for internal town department uses as well as public-facing uses.
Excuse me. Before Mr. Carey begins, I just wanted to provide just a framework because the committee met last in March, and we also have some new participants. So it might be helpful to give or remind folks of what the committee's framework has been. The committee wanted to hear from town departments, ideally needs for public-facing services and programs before commencing community engagement. And the reason for that was to really give the community something to consider and react to, as well as share their own ideas. It does not take the place of community engagement. There was an emphasis on the committee on public-facing needs and services, so that's what is presented here. However, the committee also wanted to hear all of town departments' ideas, so you will also see some other ideas as well, so nothing is left off the table. There is a lot of synergy around some uses, so that is something that Chaz will present tonight, and that's all I'll say about that. The committee does have about a full year to embark on this process. Staff has applied for a grant that would enable us to hire a consultant to actually manage and conduct that robust and fair community engagement. So there will be an opportunity to have a timeline, to notice, to let people know when they can participate, listen to one another, as well as share their own proposals. We just wanted to emphasize that. And there is an opportunity for public comment, but we just, because this is going to be a rather jam-packed meeting, that it be just focused on what is being presented tonight. So I will turn it over to Chaz. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you to the committee. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chaz Carey. I'm the town administrator here in Brookline. And I'm very happy to present this report on the potential uses of Fisher Hill West as filtered through the needs of town departments, particularly where it comes to public-facing options. All of Maria's caveats, I won't repeat them, are just really important to keep in mind here. The committee asked what did the town departments need, and gave us some parameters to work within, and all the town departments have been responsive to this. Fisher Hill, as you know, is currently in use as a municipal site for many reasons, and is the goal is to figure out within the framework established by the committee what the use would be in the event that the town were to operationalize it for its internal departmental use. So I will begin this presentation. You can see here exactly where we are talking about, Fisher Hill West, right here off of Route 9. The site's central location has the potential to create and enhance social connections between North and South Brookline. It meets demand in a neighborhood that has not historically had access to easily accessible public services, although it does require a transit link in order to ensure equitable access throughout the community. It is not easily accessible either by public transit or even by multimodal transit, like a bike. It is really a car-centric site to reach. Here's the background and timeline of where we have been, where we are going. You can see where we are now, which is September 8th. I am presenting this community resource proposal to the committee. And then you can see too what Maria was talking about in terms of the potential next steps and where we are going. Recall, you have time. The community has time. We want to obviously be prepared for January 2028 when the Pierce students move out and go back to the new school on Harvard Street. But until that happens, you have that space is being used by the schools pursuant to an MOU that does not expire until the schools depart from that building. So there is significant amount of time to think, which is why it's good that we're doing this work so early in the process. This is a long kind of description of the proposal's methodology. These slides I think are really important in terms of background, but I'm not going to dwell on them or read them to you. They are kind of an additional background about the overview that Maria gave you about how this was put together, how the departments were polled, looking at all the different plans and proposals that were put in place and have been developed by the community for what I'm referring to what the community wants, including the community health assessment, the strategic asset plan, the disparity report. All of those things were taken into consideration when developing a proposal to try and work within the committee's framework. Now, we looked at other potential options for the space as part of doing our due diligence, but I will emphasize here, these are preliminary, very preliminary in some cases. We did not, for example, do a deep dive into the micro housing incentive, the micro housing incentives under Chapter 40Y, for example, in part because we can't. There aren't any regulations for it yet. But those options are out there, and we took a preliminary look at them, really to issue spot more than anything else, to say, okay, some of the other ideas that are out there, what is enticing about them, and what are the potential barriers to access, so that when we start gaming that out, seeing what pencils out, people are not starting from scratch. You can see too, we talked about other outdoor facilities, including a pool. That feasibility study for the pool is coming. The rec department is doing it this year, is moving forward with that, the money in question to move forward to do that. So, while I certainly have, thoughts about where a pool could and couldn't go. Ultimately that feasibility study is going to be the gold standard for what's even feasible in the community. So that is ongoing and moving forward. And so the initial thoughts here are just that, initial thoughts. So here's the site from the air. The municipal uses overlay was adopted in June 2020. There are 4 lots of varying sizes, totaling 3.18 acres, and there are 124 surface parking spaces there currently. The The site spans some residential zoning districts, so large parcel single-family homes. It abuts the Fisher Hill Reservoir Park and Field, and then you can see in what was Fisher Hill East is now the Newbury of Brookline, which is luxury senior housing constructed on 4 acres across the street from the site on Fisher Avenue. And it is also within that special overlay district. So here are the existing conditions as they exist now. This is the biggest building, the academic building. You can see on the top the parking lot view, and then from the Fisher Avenue front entrance, it's there. It is built into a hill, so you have 2 stories with 2 basement levels. There's around 10,000 square feet of gross floor area per floor. We have been able to conduct some upgrades have been put in there, and we've been able to conduct others. Previously, Newbury College used it for classrooms and labs. Currently, Pierce is using it for classrooms, and the building department is using the bottom floors for workshop space. IT is using it for working and storage as well, particularly storage for the school department work. With that said, even with all the upgrades and the general use of this building, the building does need work. It needs structural work, particularly on the roof. We have a schedule, capital improvement plan schedule for roofing of our buildings. That budget is under, I would say, historic pressure, given the environment that we're operating under. And adding a new large-scale building with this kind of footprint, and therefore this kind of large roof, is going to be a significant cost. So even though the committee has tasked us with looking and focusing where possible on adaptive reuse, I do want to flag that this building is turnkey ready, but it will still incur costs down the line to maintain and upkeep to the standards that the town wants it to be upkeep to. Currently, you can see the workshop space in the tech room. IT serves primarily the public schools out of this space. The Public Buildings Division has really benefited from this space as workshop space. When Pierce moved in here, this was the #1 concern, was that the workshop would have nowhere to go. It's really been an incredible benefit, especially with the town hall garage now closed during Pierce construction. Being able to have the building department's major, large scale operations that require that workshop space be physically sited at this building is really critical. Any sort of ultimate decision about what's going to happen on this site needs to tackle the questions of where these operations are going to go. So it's a puzzle. If you shift them out of this building, we're going to have to figure out where to put them. So, and these are not minor operations. It's not just storage. It really is quite significant in terms of the value to both of these departments. The other structure on the site is West Hall, also known as Ellis House. It was built in 1927. We currently use it for storage. Sensitive material is obviously stored in a appropriate manner. The lot is used for storage of trailers. It is not structurally unsound, but it is in significant disrepair. The interior is really not usable for anything other than storage at this juncture. And we have not yet estimated how much it would cost to restore it in its current framework. I talked a little bit previously about how this site is zoned for single-family residential. It falls within the National Register District. So as a result, any demolition would require a stay. Historical properties under the National Register are subject to additional review under the Historic Preservation Act, especially whenever federal funding is involved. With that said, all 4 parcels of the site are under the overlay district. And with that said, any recreation use would require a special permit, but office use or libraries would be as of right. If we were to shift this site from its current use to multifamily housing, that would require new zoning altogether, and that would require a vote at town meeting. Depending on what type of zoning you're talking about, you could have it fall under the parameters of the Housing Choice Act, which allows for a majority vote if you're doing something that's purely about building new housing. But as we discovered with the MBTA Communities Act, that's actually a very narrow window. Most zoning that does things more than just add housing requires the 2/3 majority. So any sort of environmental thoughts or anything beyond the basics, any form-based zoning, et cetera, is always going to be a 2/3 vote in the absence of a legislative fix to that issue. So this is the guts of what we're talking of what the town and the departments are talking about. A town-wide multicultural recreation and community center. Something that would be committed to the well-being physically and socially of all the residents, from infants to seniors, regardless of ability, and connecting the community equitably through enriching programs, youth scholarships, social services, and popular activities and classes. The center would connect and complement the 10-acre Fisher Hill Reservoir Park and Field, which is already host to 1,000 hours of community sports and events. It would be a dedicated space shaped by the community. And the goal here is, as said at the beginning, increasing these social connections, the inclusion, and resilience. The project as envisioned currently, again, very preliminary, would be 3 phases. Phase 1 would involve reusing the existing academic building to enable residents to enjoy it and use it for other purposes as early as 2028 with modest retrofits. Again, no demo, saves capital costs, saves embodied carbon issues, doesn't require the demo delay, all of those good things. Phase 2 would involve constructing an indoor basketball court, which would not be dependent on school operations, to serve as a multi-use gym in a new 5,000 square foot addition to the academic building on Lot B. The optional phase 3 would involve, if surface parking proves underutilized, then lots C and D could be considered for another recreation facility of about 1 acre. But if parking needs to be relocated or expanded, we may need to consider the use of Lot A. So adaptive reuse. Right now, the goal of this proposal would be to create a space that would offer programs serving 500 people, up to 500 people daily, beginning in 2028. And that would be accomplished through interdepartmental use. The 2 primary departments that would be using this would be the Council on Aging for a senior center annex, and the Recreation Department for operations beyond, for all age groups, and all, particularly in regards to equity access and equity applicants. So recommended retrofits would include age and dementia-friendly design, combining small rooms on the first floor to create a fitness area, upgrading reception and kitchen space, lockable partitions if we were to put a preschool program in there, which is a consideration, creating a tot playground on Lot B, similar to the tot playground the private daycare has on Town Hall space currently, a vegetable garden, youth ecology projects, a potential EV charging station. We would be critical here is to assess parking demand. Again, the name of the game here is accessibility. And in the absence of any other way of getting here realistically, we need to think about how people would ordinarily get there and what we can do to increase access to people who do not have access to cars. We'll talk a little bit more about that down the line here. Phase 2, you can see the outline here. This blue outline is where the indoor gym and court would go. It would clear the building department loading platform, maintain some of the existing surface parking on Lot B. Again, important to assess demand. At this point, we can consider what we would like to do with Lot A. Would we like to use West Hall in some way? You know, really all that is usable at this point is the bones of the structure. Would we consider putting multifamily housing there? But would we consider some other sort of recreational facility? Again, that is something we would need to just assess what we currently have and how much use it's getting. Because realistically, if it's seeing, tremendous use and we're seeing backup onto Fisher Avenue or anywhere else into the neighborhood, we're going to need to consider, potential for, a parking structure, for example. These 3 longer term municipal uses. So Lot C leaves about 1 acre that we could explore if parking is not an issue. So we could, and again, if that feasibility study about the pool determines that this is the right space for it, then 1 acre is reserved here to gauge support for longer term capital improvements. Now, obviously, doing this in a phased way enables us to take stock at the end of every phase, at the completion of every phase, and say, well, are we doing this, or are we continuing on with this? Are we modifying what we're doing? Are we going back and reassessing? It's important not to do everything at once. So let's talk a little bit about what we are thinking about in terms of how this new space would operate, this phase 1 space. So REC would get a multi-purpose facility that it does not share with the schools, which is a critical need for rec currently, an indoor space that does not share with the school department. It would allow for concurrent classes for all age groups without disruptions. It eliminates the need to borrow all that space from the schools. It eliminates the need to, reducing the labor and custodial costs on the school department side, building wear and tear. Rec is no longer confined by the school schedule. All of those operations at Elliott Street currently, and the Environmental Education Center at 654 Hammond near Sewell, would be able to consolidate, and we could then potentially look at adaptive reuse of those spaces. The senior center satellite. This is a big desire for the community. The current senior center is at capacity most of the time. It is really heavily used. And while we love that building and we're very grateful to have it, it's also starting to show its age. And the use of that building means that it is aging faster than some of our other buildings are. Being able to have an auxiliary location to meet the high demand that we currently have, with additional activities, access to outdoor activities, other programs and services, while also having it be an intergenerational space. That's another thing that we've heard from the Council on Aging that's important, which is that the senior center is obviously a senior-centric space, a space for people in the senior community to have a space of their own, but it's also a space where they can interact as appropriate and as they feel inspired to, with the other members of the community, to have that access and that intergenerational conversation in an organic way, in an organic shared space, is really critical. Having this as a general community center is really important because, as identified in the disparity report, we don't have one. We don't have a general purpose community center. We have the community room in the police department, which is a windowless space. It's it's not the most inviting space. It's also because it's right in the atrium there. For example, if someone is getting booked or move through there, or is disputing a parking ticket, that's all happening in the hallway while events are going on there. We don't have the kind of dedicated community space where, for example, if someone wanted to rent it, we could be able to rent it to them. And so this creates that opportunity. This slide talks a little bit about all the different things that we could use the space for in phase one. And you can see the great work that the planning department and Maria, under her leadership, has done to get all the other potential stakeholders around town and around town departments, including the housing authority, into the space. What can this be used for? You see rec at the center here. Primarily the primary operator of the space is most likely the recreation department. With that said, I think the senior center is the partner in that, particularly given the strong demand for senior-centric space and activities. This would be a sample of a 12-hour year-round recreation programming. You have from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. You could have supplemental classes for infants to preschool. You could have Mommy and Me Fitness, senior enrichment, the senior social hub. All of that is possible when you have these 10,000 square foot floors with existing partitions and space available to you. So you have the ability to have your own thing going on, and then you have the kind of serendipitous experience from interacting with people in the hallways or in the shared common spaces. Then you could have after-school enrichment programs. We have really, ever since the loss of the rec department run after-school program, we have been thinking, really seriously about what would it mean to the community to have that come back and come back better. It is one of the most critical needs for working families in Brookline to have after-school care available after the school day ends for school-aged children in order to make life work. So to be able to have kindergarten through 8th grade after-school enrichment in a dedicated space run by the rec department would be extremely beneficial for us. And so we're looking at that as a potential option here. And then the revived Brookline Center for Adult Education, Adult and Community Education, would be able to use the space from 6 to 10 p.m. There's some overlap with the daytime programs, but for those evening classes that are offered, this would be a space to offer them in. And again, it frees up some of the school space. It frees up, some of the very tight rec space that's being used currently for that work. And then when you think about what the community center programming is outside of town departments. It can really be shaped by residents. If we're looking to have, artistic programs, if we're looking to have social wellness and clinical services, there would be free space available for community groups to reserve for meetings and events. And potentially we would be able to use the rental space at a premium for additional revenue for larger scale events, particularly on the weekends. That's in very preliminary stages, but the idea there being that we could offset some of the costs of use there. There's plenty of opportunity for expanded programming, being able to, and again, using the space as is. I've talked a lot about this as is, so I'm just going to kind of leave this here and move on. But I just think it's important to realize that even the space as is in the academic building with minimal refitting and retrofitting has a lot of opportunities. This would be we would be able to use this as part of the scholarship program that we offer to the Housing Authority. It would be great to be able to expand the list of program offerings available to them. And again, one of the crucial factors in all of that is space. How are we going to have enough space to be able to provide additional equitable services to underserved populations in town? So it's going to cost money to do this operationally. This is not solely a capital project. Expanded hours of operation are obviously going to cost more money, and it's too early to be able to estimate additional revenue. I will say the Recreation Department does fantastic work in ensuring that the fees and other charges involved sustain the programming. But you have to realize that utility costs and the costs of regular maintenance and upkeep are beyond most likely what the revenue from these programs would bring in, particularly if we want to maintain their accessibility and affordability. There would need to be additional staff. There's no capital budget in place yet. The consolidation of operations would provide some efficiencies. We could talk about, the use of space that is no longer necessary for operations. The rec department is currently the main operational hub of the rec department is currently at Elliott on the top floor there. And that space could be used for something else. So again, the phased approach really helps us here in terms of assessing the revenue and costs. And because this is not a permanent leap into providing all of these services, it is a phased moving into the process. We can assess on a regular basis how much this is costing us, what we can and can't provide. So here's some just material from the gap analysis, particularly from the strategic asset plan, about we're talking about this lack of appropriate facilities, the desire for building a community center, and a location in or near South Brookline. You see the older adult community health needs assessment, spaces to provide physical and social engagement, intergenerational programming, more inclusive programming and diverse programming for older adults. And again, fitness programs. Fitness programs are so oversubscribed right now at the Council on Aging, and we really need to be able to provide more options for people who want to remain mobile and independent. The disparity report also talks about the lack of a community center, a space for diverse community members to safely interact. A space like this at Fisher Hill could provide that opportunity. And finally, from the community health impact assessment, talking about access to social services, where we have this resource-rich community unable to, or people are unaware of where they can go. Having a central community center to provide that hub is a really important idea. We've talked a little bit about that Housing Authority. I'll move on from this. Here's this, more talking about the importance of social infrastructure and community resiliency, the loneliness epidemic, all of those things, having a third space besides work and home that people can go to. So with that said, this is the big area where the town needs to think creatively about how to address getting to the space. This location is optimal in terms of what we could do there. It's not optimal in terms of how to get there. It's not located near robust public transit. It's hilly, bicyclists and pedestrians are going to have a hard time getting there, particularly if you're pushing a stroller, if you have mobility issues. But car-dependent siting denies access to people who don't have access to cars or for whatever reason. So the solution that we are looking at is a connector shuttle of some kind. And this has been a long-term ask and desire from the senior center in particular, expanding the availability of transit services. Transit services are what has led to the loss of the recreation after school program. It's what led to, it's one of the more major concerns that we hear from older residents. So everyone in town would really benefit from some form of subsidized transit to a central hub, to and from a central hub. And so likely, potential solutions here involve a public-private partnership, involve looking for grant funding, although I will say we have been diligent in applying for earmarks and grant funding for senior transportation services, thus far unsuccessfully, unfortunately. But all of these things would require a great deal of study. We're lucky that we have time. We're also lucky that we can reach out to partners. But whatever happens at this space, transportation is going to be the cornerstone of its success. And so as the committee continues its work, regardless of what the ultimate form of a plan takes, transportation is going to have to be the central part of that discussion. So part of the consultant's scope of work that Maria was talking about would be to estimate parking demand. Obviously, a shuttle would still be a fundamental component. We talk again about how this three-phase approach is informative, allows us to assess at every appropriate interval. Now, the next couple of slides show a couple of conceptual site explorations that co-locate expanded recreation center, like a new or adaptive reuse with an outdoor lap pool or a pool complex. It also takes a look at how multifamily housing might be put on the site, as well as all residential uses. These are more preliminary than the plan for the community center that we just spent a fair amount of time talking about. These are really just baseline analyses of potential alternative uses for the space that we are still in the process of thinking through. But we want to start having those conversations sooner rather than later so that benefits and drawbacks can be identified and discussed in the public rather than in a vacuum, or saying, wouldn't it be nice if. Explored uses and site studies. So again, these are very conceptual, not studied for feasibility. All the caveats in the world here. So we looked at a couple of different housing-oriented solutions. We asked the BHA to take a look at it. What are the criteria for a feasible project in Fisher Hill? There's obviously 40B is an option there. Which allow it would depending on when the 40B window closes, it would need to be a friendly 40B. The town would need to play a part in that. At least 1.5 acres, but preferably all of it, because there'd be low to no acquisition costs. There'd be substantial contribution from the Affordable Housing Trust. It would need to be 5 to 6 stories, and there'd be surface parking only. Mixed income, say around 53% affordable housing. You would need to have a for-profit developer. Again, you would need to either have a friendly 40B or a special district rezoning. You'd probably be looking at around 45 units, 5 to 6 stories, of which 47% would be at market rate, 13% affordable at 30% median income, 40% affordable at 60% median income. And then there's this idea of the starter home zoning district from Chapter 40Y, which does not have regs for it, whereby at least 50% of the units are 3-bedroom, 10% affordable at 110% of the median income by right, max unit size of 1,850 square feet, a minimum of 4 units per acre. So as you can see, per the fit test that you're about to see on the next pages, that sort of zoning district would require the whole site, most likely. So at this time, for the outdoor pool, we don't have that feasibility study. It is coming. It is coming, early next year is when we're anticipating that moving forward. So we've estimated test fits. We have estimated test fits for this site. We this phased approach doesn't preclude siting some sort of pool there, even if the academic building is being used for community operations. But to understand this, we estimated the size of an 8-lane lap pool, as well as a full pool complex with a family pool, which is modeled on Newton's Gath pool. And the intensity of use and the impacts on abutters on the streetscape are not fully analyzed. So that's an important area that would need to be taken into consideration too. So if you want to see some of the pools that are in operation now, obviously we have the Crane pool at the Aquatic Center, or the pool at the Crane Aquatic Center, and which has 3 indoor pools. The nearest outdoor pool is is in Brighton, is in Cleveland Circle. So, so here are some of the maps or the site layouts for adaptive use and new housing. Here's that smaller footprint in Lot A that we talked about. So four multifamily stories, 4 stories of multifamily housing. Potential for ownership opportunities, potential for rental. We haven't tested feasibility for number of units or affordability. Theoretically, you could restore West Hall, but you probably wouldn't get more than 2 condos out of it, or you could use it for office space. 6 stories on that site almost certainly would be too intrusive. 4 stories, though, might not pencil out. It might not be enough for developers to take a chance on the parcel. The cost to rehabilitate West Hall is likely extensive, and we would need to really understand the impact on parking there, particularly if that's a different purpose with a different entryway, a different driveway, and so forth. So look at pool with a new rec building and housing. So here you can see the potential for an outdoor pool and patio with a new rec building. And then instead of using the old space for a rec center, you just build new housing there on Lot B. Realistically, if you want multifamily housing that's subsidized, it's got to be 6 stories. That's what pencils out under the current conditions, and really, even under more favorable market conditions, that's what's going to entice a developer. Fewer than 6 stories would be difficult. So a lap pool versus a pool complex. There's no family pool. That's obviously a concern. Having 6 stories without buffer zones for abutters is a significant concern. And it really does strongly suggest that the site would need to be 100% residential in order to reduce the impact on the neighboring community. If there was a lap pool and housing with no rec center, it would still lack a family pool. You'd have you'd have West Hall replaced by parking. It would retain more surface parking, which would be good. The pool alone with housing doesn't address the issues that were raised in terms of the other community needs. So this is this is one possibility that you could look at. Housing in a pool. But again, this is at a very preliminary phase, and we're just thinking about how the pieces of the site fit together, the puzzle pieces of the site fit together. All multifamily with no rec center. Based on the Newbury site plan for mixed income options, the red outline marks up, the approximate dimensions of the 3-acre Fisher Hill site. The topography, however, is not represented. The Newbury is 5 stories. It's got 40 to 60 feet setbacks. It's 160 units and 90 parking spaces, of which 43 are concealed. So again, we don't know what percentage of subsidized uses are possible. It's possible that it would be higher than 15%, which would be good. But again, 100% residential space does have trade-offs. There are no really alternative sites for community recreation center like the one that we're thinking of here. So a purely residential use of the space may not be the highest and best use of the space, although again, that's where the community testing is going to be crucial to see whether or not that's bared out. The sort of mansion apartments, the idea of having these 72 units as a potential Chapter 40Y site. Again, a single 6-story structure would better, or, where even possible, more than one 6-story structure would better achieve a higher percentage of subsidized units. But then you're talking about the setback problem. For a site up like this, you're thinking maybe only 15% affordable housing. And again, you still have all the trade-offs inherent in 100% residential use of the site. adaptive use in new housing. If you have if you create the new recreation center, you use Lot A and part of Lot B for expanded parking, and you build 5-6 story multifamily mixed income. Interrupting the connection between the rec center and the park is not ideal. Expanded surface parking might not be sufficient with all the demand on having both a rec center and a 5-6 story residential building there. And just more parking would be required than for an urban site. You probably see spillover into the Fisher Hill Reservoir parking lot there, almost certainly. And finally, a pool complex in a residential center. So you see the base reference here is from the Icon architecture visualization. An outdoor and indoor pool setup would connect to the reused academic building, and access would be out of the back here, which is which would unfortunately cause more intense traffic via a historically low intensity neighborhood street. It also just doesn't leave any realistic options for parking. 40 spaces on Lot B is insufficient for even staff. So you'd be talking about building something that has no realistic parking. It's impossible to get to except by shared transit. And I don't think that's realistic, unfortunately. So the pool complex here, a different sort of pool complex with a rec center that would allow for expanded parking. This sort of horizontal layout, it would be better in terms of parking. But given that even existing parking is felt to be insufficient, you'd still have a pretty significant crunch there. We talked about the lap pool only in the context of having the academic building shift over to housing. If we were to maintain it, could theoretically be attached to the new rec building. More parking is saved. The possibility for access via Fisher Hill. It's again still too early to determine. If you lose the family pool, that's a big issue. It's going to require, again, that feasibility study to assess not just where a pool could go, but what type of pool the community is looking for. So we're coming to the end. Thank you all for your patience and your attention. Here's a summary of the considerations. We don't have a community center. We don't have a rec center. That has put a lot of constraints on our operations, particularly operations that reach underserved populations. And frankly, our growing senior population. The Disparity Report and the Housing Authority have both expressed desire for the townwide community center. Adaptive reuse of the space requires less upfront effort and enables us to get things going as early as 2028. A phased approach allows us to assess it every step of the way and think about what we want to do with the rest of the space and whether what we're doing is working. There's high synergy among town departments that would use that space if it were to be used as a community center. Indoor activities would reduce impact on the residential neighborhood around it, and consolidating the community space from the schools, the police station, from Elliott, and the early childhood locations would have significant operational efficiencies for the town. With that said, again, rec programs alone, they can be self-sustaining in terms of their operations, but not the operations of the site. Mixed income housing as an alternative would likely require 5 to 6 stories, especially if more than 15% affordability is sought. An apartment building would realistically need to keep some pretty deep setbacks in order to buffer scale in this neighborhood, which is a 2.5-story neighborhood. Parking demand would basically preclude the operation of commingled town services there. Mansion apartments that we talked about, the 40Y process would be 100% residential too, and would not likely provide more than 15% affordable units. Although again, since we don't know what the regs are there, that's still a bit of a question mark. Outdoor pools, you saw the various different ways we tried to slot an outdoor pool into that site. We reduce the necessary parking amenities. With that said, this is not even the beginning of that feasibility study for the pool. So hold that space. We're still looking into that. Long-term shuttle care service is going to be critical to sustaining anything that we do here. We have that model in Watertown. We are looking at other opportunities. With that said, it is really a fight to figure out how to get equitable, affordable transportation, public transportation options, even, lightly subsidized, let alone heavily subsidized. And so as a result of that, we're recommending cautiously preserving as much existing parking as possible and scoping at every step of the way how much additional parking, even with a shuttle, is going to be needed to avoid a burden on the neighborhood. I talked earlier about the carpentry workshops and the server rooms. They have to go somewhere. They really don't have alternative locations currently. So any sort of use of the academic building that removes those departments from that building is going to need to identify where they're going to go. Storage and parking needs of the police department have been highlighted, but have not yet been factored into any space planning. You can see it when you go by the public safety building. The police lot is jam packed. There are cars parked on the street. It's not ideal. We haven't really talked about that need. The site has already been rezoned, so we have that municipal uses overlay district. While rec facilities would require a special permit, multifamily use would require new zoning altogether. The fuel-free bylaw could be applicable. We have to think about abating any environmental hazards such as lead paint or asbestos. Lead is obviously gone from the academic site, but asbestos in wherever it's been identified and as degraded or wherever we've needed to go into the walls has obviously been taken out, but we would still need to do a full assessment of anything we would do there. Capital improvement projects have not been budgeted for. With that said, the reuse of the academic building in the short term does have advantages since we are going to have costs to maintain it regardless of what we're doing. That is it from my presentation. I want to thank you all again for your patience and your interest as we've worked through this. I saw a number of hands.
Carl had his hand up first, I think.
Yeah.
Carlos?
Yes, thank you, Bernard. And thank you, Chaz, for this. I apologize in advance if my comments are a little long, but I think I was the one who actually proposed that we hear from the town department heads of what their possible uses are for something like this. And when I thought about it, I really thought about, okay, so there's a form that gets sent, and then that form comes back, and we see sort of all the raw data of what it is, and it doesn't get necessarily packaged into a proposal, because I think when it gets packaged into a proposal like the one that you just did, which is very detailed, I think we miss a lot of opportunities. And the reason why I say this is because there are different levels of how to approach this site. I agree with you that the transportation part is difficult, and when we purchased the site, that was one of the things that was mentioned to people. Should we purchase this? It's not the easiest way to get to it. But the Pierce School has shown that a lot of the kids do go walk or bike up the hill on a daily basis. And also the concerts at Fisher Hill also show that a lot of people do manage to go there by non-car centric. So I was a little curious, or not curious. I was a little afraid or not comfortable, I guess, with that denominating as car centric. There's definitely a need for a transportation aid, a way to get there, but that would be the case for a building this size. That probably would be the case anywhere in town where we can fit this building, which is Lars Anderson or Southbrook, the golf course, any of these places where we can actually have a space that is big enough to fit the space. It's probably not close to public transportation because of the nature of where public transportation is in our town. But one thing I wanted to push back on was, I think, on the idea of the adaptive reuse, and coming from me, who has been critical about how we do some of the projects in town, I think in this case, a lot of the things we are proposing, and I agree with you, the idea of a community center is important, but I think a community center is really a change of use of what this space has been used as before. It was the academic, a library, and a career center. And I think we missed an opportunity to create a space that in itself physically shows what Brookline is about and what Brookline and how Brookline can work together. When you as an architect, when you do a community center, it has to do much more. It has to do a lot more. Just not just the space that are for the different activities, but how it all interacts together, and how the major idea, the big idea for the building is there, and how that shows what or exemplifies what that town believes in or thinks that way. And by focusing so much on the adaptive reuse, we miss that opportunity of creating a space that people can really feel comfortable and enjoy for the activity that they're using. And for me, it's a little frustrating because when we've built the schools, we've said, the existing school is no longer works for what we need. We need to do something bigger or different because it's different the way that we do things now. Even though we haven't changed the use from the new school to the old school, it still is a school. In this case, we are trying to go from a Catholic school that had a very small budget when it started, which was the original builder of this building, into a community center that's supposed to be very welcoming and so forth, and that it works together within the site. And as you know, the site has been a collection of different purchases. So when the original building was built, they didn't own West Hall. They didn't own the parking lot. It may have all been very differently situated or located if it was all thought holistically. So I think to make my comments shorter or cut them off, I think we are jumping the gun right now of how to use the space. I think what's useful, or what will be very useful from this process that we just went through, is to see what the town departments thought they could use it, and then take that and see what the residents think about those uses, and then after that, take that and create a space or a building or something that works for that in an ideal situation, and then see what that comes to, and then see how it can be phased for economic reasons or not, so working from the outside in rather than from the inside out, or whichever way we've thought about it right now. I think right now we're actually shooting ourselves on the foot by doing this approach, because we're still going to be spending a lot of money, and we're going to be phasing it in some way where at the end we're like, well, we spent a ton of money and we don't necessarily like it, because it's not exactly how it would have been done if it had been done in a holistic way. One last thing, I think we are underestimating or appreciating West Hall. I think West Hall could be a fantastic space that maybe is connected to this community center, and it's used in a way that some of the residents would really appreciate the architecture and the way that the scale and everything of how West Hall is used. And when I see that it's replaced by parking, I think that's just unacceptable. That's like when we tore down the mansion at Lars Anderson because we couldn't keep it up. We also underestimating the slope, because it's much easier to enter through Hyslop and then have different levels of parking, for example. So it doesn't need to be all surface parking, or you can do parking under a building without doing almost any any movement of Earth. And I'm going to, I think, leave it there. I do want to make sure that you, that Chaz, you understand that I really appreciate what you just presented. And this is not a criticism of the staff or anything like this, but I think as the back of my, my architecture experience is saying, wow, this is really jumping the gun and going in the wrong direction. And that's what I would tell a client if we were to do this. And when I was working at Graham Gunn, we did several community centers. He loved to do those. And we always sort of had to say, let's take a step back and see what how this represents the town. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carlos. Any other members of the committee have something to say? Okay, do you want to take public comment or?
I think I'd be happy to, and I think just I really appreciate Carlos's comments. I think it is important to think about, and we did think about this question of, do we come with a laundry list of what each department wants, which we have, and we're happy to give to you, or do we try and combine that? And I think it is important, even if ultimately the community says, in combining this, it's not prioritizing what the community wants to prioritize. It is, I think, important to at least take that step to give you something to react to. And, again, we're not wedded to this proposal. This proposal is one potential option that tries to put together the many different interlocking pieces of the departments, right? Because take, for example, right. If I ask DPW what they want a new municipal service center. If I ask,
Right.
if I ask, all the departments have critical needs. And I think what Maria and her team have done really well here is to try and take those and synthesize them using the existing studies we already have and come up with a baseline proposal. But again, I very much take your point. If this is not the direction that we want to be going in, we don't have to go this direction. But this is an
No, and
attempt
I think this
Yeah.
is the direction, but I think we're just jumping the gun. And because I think, I mean, in my opinion, I think what you presented is exactly on target of what the town needs. It's one of the few towns that doesn't have a community center where all these synergies meshing together of ages, of activities, or all these things. But I think the process of getting there is it's a little bit longer than what we just did. And I think it also has to be done once you have the program. It's like, okay, so this is the stuff we want. Then you need to hire and to do hire someone to do a feasibility plan
Okay.
to say this is what we do. How do we design this together? Because a committee can't do that on its own. So
Okay, Michael Roper?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't figure out how to get my mute off there, Bernard. Just a couple questions, Chaz. I agree with Carlos. This is really comprehensive analysis, and you're right. Any department you go to is going to give you the same answer, like, oh, we have no space, we have no place to go. So but I think I'd like to spend some more time on that slide when they're finally posted. Was the one where you had kind of gone through and had a compatible public facing slide where there was all the different departments broken out in a grid. And I think that's what, as a committee member, I was looking forward to taking away from this the most was, what are the needs of each department? And I saw it there, right? And I see what you're trying to do to kind of, put it together. But if we could spend some time there, I think that's what we were looking for, the input we were looking for as a committee. I don't want to speak for the rest. I was looking for as a committee member to see what were the individual needs. I mean, obviously the senior center, the recreation department, I get all those, the housing department, but I wanted to kind of double click into some of those other departments that we may be overlooking.
Sure.
Great.
Excuse me, these were the departments I had talked to. It really talked to almost every department head. So this was something that was pretty much well known across the departments that we were doing this work. And everything that I culled is represented here. So there's nothing, in a notebook somewhere. If you were to interview individual departments, you might dredge up more ideas, but at least this is everything that I was able to cull in the period I was interviewing departments.
It's great, Maria. Thank you. This is exactly what I was looking for anyway.
Okay, it's 8:03 and I would like to keep meetings to 1 hour. I see that one person from the public has had her hand up, so I'll take Ann Lusk's question.
Thank you very much, Ann Lusk. I live at 18 Hart Street. With the world the way it is today, I think none of us want to have a winner and a loser. I firmly support the pool somewhere in Brookline. I get up every morning 7:30 and I would go to park school because for $40 for the summer, I could swim laps for an hour. But I didn't get to swim with my grandchildren because I didn't want to burden my daughter and son-in-law with them paying extra money for me to go as their guest, and they were members there. I grew up swimming on the Ohio River. I had to swim across because my mother was an Ohio River rat. So I strongly endorse having a pool because it's one thing Brookline doesn't have and the other communities do, and we have climate change. I also happen to have a heart tug for West Hall. Imagine if that was once the president's house of a university. And when you had special events at a community center, you could go there nicely dressed, have cocktails, which probably is not good for your health now. But that's a classy building with a spectacular staircase. I've already talked to this idea over with Bernard Green and also Michael Rubenstein. They were very patient with me when I suggested it. I also recently was able to talk to George O'Leary. He's 87. He used to drive garbage to the dump. So I asked him what is underneath the old dump site. He said dirt and concrete and some leaves. I would like you to look at the old back dump site, not the new dump site that now has Skyline Park on top of it. That's where the trash went, according to Charles. Before that, they burned it in the incinerator. There is an ash pit, but the ash pit is over by the pond. You could take this section as you're leaving the old dump. There's less fill on the upper right side. That area is not near residential homes. You would have cars driving on Transfer Station Road and Industrial Road to get to a parking lot. The parking lot could be on the back section of the old dump, the back dump, where the slope is. You could have the pool after you excavate down, you'd be at grade, and the pool could go into at grade. Because the Lost Pond Conservation Land is under Article 97, you can't put buildings on it, but you could carve out areas, leave all the trees, put grass, and put picnic tables. And at Park School, families could go there, have a swim, go outside of the pool, and have dinner at a picnic, and then go back into the pool. Please look also then at the back dump and consider the feasibility of putting the pool there. Jazz, what you've presented tonight is lovely. I would love to serve the staff with the town. I happen to adore the DPW workers. They're all such good sports. And if maybe on the back of a pool building on the old dump land, a facility could be built that would serve them. If they're plowing in the middle of the night, maybe they'd want to have an hour's sleep, and that building could be serviced because the pool building would be owned by the town as well as the pool. So when you're looking at everything, don't make Brookline be a winner and a loser. Let us have a pool and let us have all of the other great ideas somehow put on the Fisher Hill Newberry College land, because the land is not large enough for the pool to be there plus parking.
Okay, that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any, I see Alex Leibowitz has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Bernard. And thank you, Chaz, and all the town staff that worked so hard on that presentation and distilling a lot of information. I'm constantly impressed with the analysis and the really high level of work we get from our town staff, and just celebrate how fortunate we all are in this community. I agree with Ann that an outdoor community pool is an asset that Brookline would really benefit from, and I think really needs. I do want to push back a little bit on the notion that Fisher Hill isn't necessarily a suitable site. As we heard tonight, the feasibility study has yet to be conducted. And it's my hope that the feasibility study, as it is conducted, will seriously consider the Fisher Hill site. As we saw in this presentation, there are several options for a community pool complex on this site that could not only accommodate this community center as well, but even with a complex the size of Gath and Newton, which is a beautiful modern facility that was recently redone a couple years ago, we'd maintain 70% of on-site parking, if I read that slide correctly. And that's not insignificant. And certainly if our our hope and goal is that part of serving any community resource on Fisher Hill is creating the shuttle service, kind of a second link transit opportunity and resource for folks, I think it's important that we think about that we don't sacrifice what is really kind of a once in a generation opportunity for the town to maintain a majority of the site for just surface parking. I think that would be a real mistake and a disservice to the community, particularly as we recognize that a shuttle or transit resource is required to make really any community resource on this site work. I also think it's important that we look at models and what other communities have been able to achieve with some of these resources. I believe something like a revolving fund model would work well for a community outdoor pool. We've seen other communities implement similar models, and pools that are member based and can charge membership fees frequently either run revenue neutral or actually produce revenue in comparable communities in Massachusetts. Newton, for instance, Belmont, a couple of our other peer communities that we've looked very closely at. And so I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that something like a community outdoor pool, which is accessible and serves people of all ages and abilities, is widely found throughout the state and country to be one of the most popular and utilized recreation resources in communities where they're built, could, through a well-devised fee schedule, partially or completely subsidize such a transit system. So I think that's an important consideration. And based on what was presented this evening, it doesn't seem to me that a community center on its own could subsidize such a system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bernard.
Okay, I see two hands up. I'll take the last two hands before we close the meeting. Susan Granoff first.
Thank you. I hadn't actually planned to speak, but in listening to the presentation that Chaz gave us, it really has me thinking about my experience of Brookline over the past 10 years that I've been involved in town government. And one thing I've realized is that increasingly, instead of being a community, we've become a collection of disparate interests with lots of juggling to try to get our concerns as a priority. But in doing so, and these are not to discount the importance of these different interests, but I think it's getting harder and harder to get a sense of being part of a community. And I do think that one of the advantages of having a community center on this property is that it would do a lot to restore our residents' sense of being part of a greater community. This is something that I think is difficult in part because we have such space constraints. And having this one opportunity to locate a appropriately sized community center is something that I think we need to give a great deal of weight to, because this is an opportunity that is unlikely to come around again. And I think there is increasingly an important need to have a center where people who don't normally come into contact with each other have an opportunity just to enjoy activities and make new connections that they wouldn't otherwise do, and also to develop a real sense of Brookline as a full ongoing community, not just people who live in North Brookline or people who live in South Brookline or in your immediate neighborhood or who go to meetings that are of concern to you, but where everyone can come together. So I heartily endorse the idea of using this property, at least in part, for a community center, and not to discount the individual needs of each department, but not to lose sight that this is something that the individual departments may not have been asked to comment on. And I think that we need to be aware that this would be a benefit to the community as a whole. And so that's what I'd like to emphasize. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. The last hand up is Elisa Jonas.
As you might guess, I'm here also promoting the outdoor pool as a really important asset. I don't know, for some of you, you've never seen this particular chart before. I'm gonna make my head disappear for a second. This is a listing of 40 Greater Boston municipalities with a population of at least 30,000 residents. Of those, Brookline is one of only 2 that doesn't provide an outdoor swimming facility for its residents, despite its 65,000 person population. We're one of the larger communities, and yet even among those with a population of 30,000 or more, Brookline is one of the larger communities. We do have numerous playgrounds. We have tennis courts, we have parks, we have athletic fields, we have gyms, basketball courts. We have an outdoor rink, and yet an outdoor swimming facility is the only one that can be used by all ages and abilities. Most other recreational facilities that Chaz mentioned are primarily for younger people, whether it's basketball courts or I'm not even sure. Well, the gyms, and as summers get longer and they get hotter, the need increases for underserved communities to have access to cooling and outdoor exercise options that only outdoor swimming can provide. Chaz and Susan emphasized the importance of community. I think you should ask people who live in towns that actually have outdoor swimming facilities. And I think you're going to find that for those communities, the outdoor pool is what has brought people together, because it is the one activity that all ages can access. And it's important for teens, it's important for younger children. I also would urge the committee to read articles, both about the loss of public swimming options for underserved communities, and also New York's new emphasis of outdoor swimming as being so important for their communities post-COVID. And most towns just have an outdoor pool as a basic resource, and Brookline deserves its own. We keep hearing about the DCR pool, but the DCR pool isn't Boston. We live in Brookline, just like we don't ask people from Newton to go to the Boston. I mean, the town of Newton does not expect people in Newton to go to the Boston pool. The pool has no lap swimming. It doesn't have good access for people who are disabled. It has almost no good seating. We are completely underserved with outdoor swimming lessons. Swimming lessons are incredibly important for young children. Drowning is a huge problem, especially in underserved communities. And we wouldn't be able to access DCR for that. Anyways, I just am urging you to consider the importance of outdoor swimming.
And we are.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'd like to end the question period. And do we need to, Maria, do we need to talk about topics for October?
Sure. The next meeting we have scheduled for October 20th. And it's up to you if you feel you need to digest a lot of this information was dense. I do want to point out we have Tim Davis, who is the director of recreation with us, and Emily Williams recently left. But if there are town departments that you want to follow up with, if you want to follow up with the building department, you could use that time to delve in a little bit deeper into what you were presented today. I also want to remind you that I did apply for a grant so that we could have a professional firm conduct community engagement. We're hoping to hear in November how the state has awarded those grants. So I will be, working on, developing a scope and so forth, hoping that we do get some grant funds, and then we could work on a timeline for community engagement. So do you have any ideas, folks, if you
Yep.
want to follow up with some town departments for October?
So let me say this. If people have specific ideas they'd like to include on the agenda for October, please say so. But if you haven't thought of them yet, or you come up with ideas later on for the agenda, reach out to Maria, and we'll pull all those things together for the agenda.
And Bernard, is there a chance that we can have the next meeting as a hybrid meeting, so person and Zoom?
I would prefer that. What do other people think? Is that a problem, Maria?
No.
Okay, so let's do it.
Thank you.
I just have to make sure we have a room that's large enough. So I will get back to you soon about one of the rooms on the first floor.
Thank you.
Okay, so any thoughts in terms of items for the agenda? Okay, reach out to Maria between now and October with any ideas you have. Okay, with that, any other business? None? Okay, we've already had our public comment. So with that, I will end the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thanks,
for
Bernard.
the presentation. By the way, before we go, Maria, is the slide deck going to be in the in our
Yeah,
package?
I'm posting it. I will send it to the committee tonight, and I will also post it to the website tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Thanks, Maria.
Chaz.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.